Is it just me, or do I look like extra white? It's kind of weird. Hey Growelt fans, and welcome to the first question and answer video. I've gathered a large number of questions from all of our subscribers on YouTube and also on the website growelt.com. Due to the number of questions that I received, I won't be able to air all of them on this particular episode. I'm going to do 6, and hopefully as the questions continue to come in, we'll keep doing these videos as long as you guys have an interest in that sort of thing. Before I get started, I want to remind everyone that's watching this, if you haven't done so already, head over to the website at growelt.com/free. You can get a preview copy of this book right here. Of course, written by me, that guy right there. And you can get the prologue and the first 2 chapters in an ebook. Just sign up on the website there. Again, that's growelt.com/free, and get yourself a free preview and check it out. Okay, moving on to the questions here. We have a total of 6. The first one is Whitney asks, if you were in their world, do you think you would be a Löwa or a human, or maybe a Child of Hel? Well, that's something that I actually haven't really thought about before. I never really thought what character I would want to be or what species I would want to be. In the Growelt universe thus far, in the first book, you get human beings, which I think we're all familiar with. You also get the questions that I get asked a lot about the Löwa. Everyone really likes the Löwa. They're kind of a canine bipedal sentient species that have a really rich, interesting culture. And then, of course, you have the Children of Hel, which Klein, I won't ruin for anyone, is just one example of them. There are others that they have yet to discover. As far as which one I would be, which species, of course I want to say human because I know that best and I like being a human being, but I think there's a lot of the Löwa in me. I kind of based a lot of the Löwa characters on my own kind of darker aspects, I guess you could say. And I think that would be interesting. I guess if I had to choose and I went to the Growelt and got to choose what kind of species I would be, I probably would choose the Löwa. Although I don't know if that would turn out really well in the end, but eh. Andreas asks, can you mix fantasy and sci-fi into a single story? The short answer is yes, you can. I think you're probably, Andreas, asking more of should you? That's something that I think is really touchy. A lot of fantasy and sci-fi fans have really particular tastes when it comes to that thing, so if they see something that's billed as a fantasy book, they want to see, you know, sword and sorcery typically, and if it's a sci-fi book, they want to see kind of technology and science take the forefront of the storytelling. But of course you can mix the elements together. Really good examples like steampunk, if you guys have ever read any steampunk books or kind of seen art from that genre. It's kind of both in a way. It's fantastical, you know, it's set in the past, usually like Victorian era, so, you know, 100, 200 years ago. And it mixes in a lot of scientific elements, so it's kind of like the meeting of those 2 genres. If you're trying to go for something that's original, that's a mix between fantasy and sci-fi, I mean, you can do it. Whether it works or not kind of remains to be seen. I don't want to sound too vague on that. I mean, it can be done. I do think, however, it's dangerous territory, and if you're going to write something like that, proceed with a lot of caution, I would say. Jack asks, why are novice writers often reluctant to ask professional writers for their opinions on their works? That's a very good question, Jack. I think, like a lot of other professional artists, they get asked a lot of questions. I know I get asked a lot of questions, and as I said in a recent video, I appreciate them and encourage everyone to ask me questions just like this. A lot of writers, especially as they get, you know, more famous, their names out there, think of George R.R. Martin's a really popular one in these years, and you can just imagine how many emails he probably gets a day. I mean, thousands and thousands. He probably gets millions every year, and there's no way he can answer all of those emails. He probably doesn't even have time to answer a small portion of them. So I think with a lot of artists, the trend is to sort of just shut it all off and say I don't read any of it, or I don't respond to any of it, to be fair. I hope that that never happens to me. I certainly get several dozen emails a day, and it takes me personally a few hours every day to look through them, and I do respond to all of them. But to answer your question, I think a lot of people are reluctant because they know that there's a slim chance that they'll get an answer with a lot of people, because writers, like everyone else these days, are really busy. And I think it really has to do with a time constraint and not so much as I don't care about your question or I don't care about you. I don't think that most writers think that. Okay, Jeff asks, you made a video about how harm to children in fantasy is somewhat taboo. Would you say that religion is similarly dangerous territory? I would say that that is similarly dangerous territory, at least as far as publishing in the United States. Religion is something that's taken very seriously all around the world. Certainly there are many places in which it's taken more seriously than in the United States, but I assume that we're speaking about the United States from what I've come to know about Jeff through some other emails in which this question came. And it can be dangerous. I don't think any message is necessarily dangerous to publish. However, it's really easy to offend people. As innocuous as some of my articles that I've written, and even the first book itself, I've had people tell me that they were offended by certain things in it. And you just have to be ready for that sort of thing, especially if you're going to delve into religious territory, either proposing certain religious beliefs or acting as a detractor from them. And Jeff, I would say that this goes similarly with any sort of ideology that one would write about, put into a novel. It's best to be very even-handed with things and not make your novel or your characters just a mouthpiece for whatever message you're trying to give across. Because even the people, like if you're preaching to the choir, say you have a book that's critiquing religion, even people who agree with you will not find it as tasteful if it's just so blatant and it's not something you have to sit there and kind of think about it. It takes a moment. It's almost like an aha effect. If it's so obvious and so heavy-handed, I think that's more dangerous than bringing up those questions at all. Tom asks, how do you finish a novel? How do you know when to finish? To answer that question, I am reminded of something that someone told me when I was working on the first book, and I was talking to him about struggling to finish because I just didn't know where to cut the story off. I didn't know, exactly what I wanted to happen in this first book. What if this is the only one that ever gets made? I wanted to cram too much into it, but at the same time, I didn't want to give it all away. So I was just struggling to, know where to cut the length of rope, so to speak, on this particular one. And, I had been drawing the process out over and over. I was making so many drafts and obsessing about it, and I was really upset when I was talking to him about it. And he said, you just need to make it good enough. It needs to be finished enough. Because if you don't finish at all, you won't be able to share it with anybody, and it's not going to do you or anyone else any good. And what I came to realize about finishing a novel is it needs to be exactly as long as it needs to be. I know that sounds really vague and kind of a shitty answer, but there's no necessarily right or wrong length. There's not a requisite number of chapters, of scenes, of words, of pages. It just needs to get the reader from point A to point B as entertainingly as possible while still serving the author's point. So when you set out to write a novel, you have to have an end goal in mind. For me, in this first book that I wrote, the end goal in mind is to show the power of the various characters, especially the dynamic between Klein's and his violent sort of demeanor and Ainsa's resistance. And I needed to show those culminate until there was like a really exaggerated sort of confrontation in which you were kind of shocked by how far Ainsa could go if she only listened to Klein. And then I kind of left that open-ended as to exactly what happened at the very end, and that will be explained later. But that was my end goal. So well before I even considered what the scene was going to be, I wanted the entire first one, of course, to be a setup, but the objective that I had in mind was to show the destructive power of Klein's capabilities. And so before you even start off to write a novel, you have to have that end goal in mind, and really all it takes to finish it is just get the reader from, the very beginning to that point. Okay, and the very last question that we're going to do on this video is Derek asks, I noticed Pokemon accessories in a lot of your videos, and being a fan of the Pokemon series, specifically Fire Red, I was wondering what is your favorite Pokemon and or your favorite type for Pokemon battles? Derek, that's a really awesome question. I do like Pokemon a lot. I real quick have played since it came out in the United States, and I have bought all the new ones, including Alpha, not too long ago, the remake. And my favorite Pokemon has changed a lot. Right now it's still a tie between Beedrill, who finally got a Mega Evolution, and Nidoking. And those are my favorite types also, so I like Bug and Poison are my favorite ones. I like to use things that no one expects are going to be good. I kind of battle competitively online here and there, and I'm not a super great player, but I do like to pull down wins where I do something that the opponent doesn't expect. So they think, like, that's a really crappy Pokemon, why is he using that? Or that's a really weird set of moves, like, why is he doing that? And I like to build things, like Bug and Poison are really underrated, and I like to use them to kind of catch my opponent off guard. So I'm a really big fan of the underdog, and I like to use those underdog types the best. So that wraps it up for this question and answer video. If you guys like me answering these questions and would want me to do a future video, let me know in the comments section, and you can also email me your questions at victor.salinas@growelt.com. And before I go, I just want to remind you guys one more time to get your free preview copy of this book right here, The Sword and Its Servant, available at growelt.com/free. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye. This is... Sorry, I'm going to do that again. Freaking neighbors.